We are live for our Saturday night recap show of Division III women's basketball, where we are as conference tournaments are well underway and the majority are done. Riley's here with me, and it'll be just the two of us tonight. And I have no intro planned. Anything you want to say, Riley, to kick us off?
I mean, Scott, you and I both know this week is always so much fun, especially these last couple of days with conference tournament semifinals, and then obviously a lot of finals today taking place. It's just the chaos of watching the bubble and all the different things that play into it. It makes it a lot of fun. The anticipation leading up to obviously the tournament field being finalized. So I think it's definitely lived up to expectations. We saw a ton of great games today. A lot of tight games down to the wire. So I've been impressed, and really it's kept both of us busy. I know over most of this afternoon and evening.
Yeah, all day. I've been watching games and putting in results as they happen, and running updated simulations and NPI to see where everyone stands. So let's just start jumping into our known Pool A's. And I have not prepared almost anything, Riley. So if you've got cool notes on any of the teams that have claimed Pool A's, please jump in. But starting off in the AEC, Immaculata, I'm going to have to pronounce all these now. They did get it done. Were they the one seed there? They were the one seed.
They went undefeated through conference play, yes.
Wow, undefeated through conference play and then took the Pool A. So that was a one bid league through and through, and so no ripple effects there. La Roche upset Penn State Behrend in the AMCC to get that conference's automatic qualifier bid.
Yeah.
Wartburg took down the ARC. Co has been a great team all year and was reasonably close to being in the Pool C conversation, but needed to get the win today to get into the tournament. They didn't quite get it done. That was a good game right down to the wire.
Yep. Yeah, I think we saw that was one of the highlight games. I know a lot of people were watching, potential bubble, kind of game, bid thief situation if Co were to have won that. And again, you start to look down this list. There is a lot of these scenarios heading into today where it felt like a team like Co that had shown flashes of being really good this season could pull off the upset. They were certainly capable of it. But credit to Wartburg for kind of, finding a way down the stretch there to pull away and end up with the AQ.
The ones in yellow are the ones that are final. ETBU is going on right now, 3 minutes to go in the third quarter, and they are up large on Hardin-Simmons. Definitely not insurmountable with almost 14 minutes to go in the game, but East Texas Baptist is looking to win that conference, and that would send Hardin-Simmons home for the year.
Yep. Yeah, and ETBU's looked really, really good. Obviously playing at home in that conference tournament, went undefeated through conference play, and looks like they're going to roll through the AAC tournament as well.
Christopher Newport won the Coast to Coast. That was probably one of the more lopsided conferences. Mary Washington did push them a little bit today, but as we all expected, Newport came away victorious. Doesn't look like that it'll be enough to get Newport into the top 16. Not being in the top 16 does not mean that you're guaranteed to not host opening weekend.
Right.
But it looks unlikely, as the bulk of the teams, or all of the teams ahead of Christopher Newport, especially the ones right ahead of them, are in some pretty flexible geographic areas that wouldn't cause a host to need to be pushed to Christopher Newport. I think there was a scenario that if Bethel was in the top 16, it might be really hard for them to host a pod. That might push some of the hosting down a little bit, but that is not the case as Bethel lost to Gustavus today. So my guess at this point is that Christopher Newport will not be hosting in the opening weekend.
Yeah. I think, as you said, geography is going to be the reason that Newport was possibly going to be in that conversation. But if they're not, at this point, it's looking like the way it's played out, we're going to have majority of our top 16, if not all top 16, hosting. We'll see how that plays out, especially in tomorrow.
In the Centennial, I believe that game will be tomorrow. CCAW is underway right now. Illinois Wesleyan up 23-12 on Carroll. First quarter is almost done. In the Collegiate Conference of the South, Piedmont won. I don't know. They were the 1 seed, so they did win. Piedmont, and then let's just talk about the CCS and the SAA right now. Piedmont won over Belhaven, and then in the SAA, Center won over Millsaps.
Yep.
And neither Center nor Piedmont can bus to East Texas Baptist.
Right.
So I am not well versed enough in the potential bracketing scenarios, but because they can't bus there, it makes sense to bus them somewhere else rather than fly them. And so we obviously can't have a Texas pod with more than 2 SCAC teams in it. And it does look like, well, I guess we could have 2 ASC teams. That's still on the table. So I'm not really sure. It would be really boring to have a pod with 2 ASC and 2 SCAC, but that might be a possibility, and then fly 1 SCAC into Whitman.
Right. And that SCAC, more than likely, I mean, it would make sense. Colorado College will be a flight either way. It would make sense that they may fly Colorado College and use that flight to get them to Whitman rather than, using Colorado College, fly them to a Texas pod and fly someone out of Texas to Whitman and use 2 flights that way. So I think that's a very likely scenario that we're looking at right now with no SAA or Collegiate Conference of the South team. Because again, as you mentioned, Scott, so Piedmont beat Belhaven and Millsaps both in Jackson, Mississippi. Either one or both would have been able to bust the ETBU. In this case, neither league will have a team that can bust the ETBU, which was not necessarily something you or I were expecting when we were kind of talking about bracketing over the course of this week.
Yeah. Now, Piedmont was the 1 seed.
Right.
But Millsaps was the 1 seed, and they went down. And so I think
we expected 1 at least.
We expected 1, but maybe not both teams that couldn't bust to ETBU to get in. But they did. So it'll be interesting to see where those get bracketed. I don't know off the top of my head where Piedmont can go.
I think looking at it last night, Piedmont can get to Randolph-Macon. They could also get to Washington and Lee. I don't believe they could get to Christopher Newport or Johns Hopkins or anyone kind of on that eastern seaboard. I think Randolph-Macon's pushing it to about 490, if memory serves.
So let's see here. Piedmont, it's not a large amount of teams. Macon, Washington, Lee, Southern Virginia, Transylvania Center, and Piedmont. And so Piedmont is about a 15. They could match up with Macon pretty well. We don't really have a good 6-11 matchup. Something like Southern Virginia and Transylvania could be kind of a fun opening round game that might go there. And then I don't know how flexible Center is themselves. Center, oh my goodness. Center can get a ton of places.
Yeah,
so
very similar to Transylvania.
So yeah, I mean, Macon, Piedmont, and Southern Virginia, Transylvania would be a pretty fun opening weekend pod.
Yeah.
Just ideas. All right, moving on to the CNE. Is that the Conference of New England?
Yep. Yeah.
Endicott won, upsetting Western New England, and I believe that's a bid thief. Endicott had a strong Pool C resume, but I think if they had lost today, they would have been on the outside looking in by just a spot or 2. But I think they would have been on the outside looking in, which does make this a bid thief situation, as Western New England is going to get a Pool C bid. So congratulations to Endicott as they get in the tournament. That was a really good game today. Brooklyn College won the City University of New York Athletic Conference. That was not today or yesterday. Was it Thursday?
It was Thursday, our first conference tournament final that we got. Yeah. Beat
conference
beat
tournament
Hunter, the top seed there in that tournament.
So Brooklyn College is going to be in, and I think they are pretty likely to face off against NYU. Ryan's in the chat helping us out. He says Piedmont will definitely go to Randolph-Macon. Brooklyn College is a 16, and they could face off with they can bust to any of Bowdoin, NYU, Scranton, or Baldwin-Wallace. So the committee has some flexibility there to potentially maybe mix some geographies a little more, depending on what they're looking to do. In the Empire 8, Geneseo State, in a thriller, took down Brockport State. This is another bid thief situation, as Brockport really looks solid for a Pool C at-large bid. And so Geneseo, going down the alphabetical conference list, is our second bid thief right after Endicott. That was a fun game to watch this morning.
It really was. I mean, we knew the Empire 8 was going to be really good. And obviously both these teams moved over from the SUNYAC last year. So it was cool to see them, kind of face off as, in the Empire 8 today in that matchup, because again, we'd see them throughout the year, really both looking strong. And it turned out to be a really, really fun conference title game. One of the closest games we got today, I think, as far as our conference title games went.
Looking over here on my iPad, I've got Hope Calvin men up, and looks like Matt Snyder's getting interviewed at halftime. I'm going to have to scrub back and see what he's teaching the 1,300 strong who are tuned into the stream. But moving on to the GNAC, St. Joseph of Connecticut won that out of the 4-seed spot. I'm kind of bummed for Johnson and Wales. They were a fun team to watch all year long, led by 3 really good freshmen. But they're going to have to wait another year before a crack at the NCAA tournament.
Yep. Yeah, it's tough in those one bid league situations, as I wrote about in my newsletter this morning and yesterday as well. But these one bid leagues, there is a lot of really talented teams like a Johnson and Wales who, their only choice, despite what they did in their body of work in the regular season as far as going through the conference schedule, right? It comes down to this conference tournament this week, and that's part of the fun of it. But it's also tough for a team like that does have a lot of potential. I think heading to next season, though, definitely a team to watch. Then, again, congratulations to St. Joseph of Connecticut for finding a way there out of the 4-seed spot.
In the HCAC, Transylvania got by Mount St. Joseph. It's been really interesting and fun to watch Transylvania this year because such success in past years. They graduate just a ton of very decorated fifth-year seniors, their longtime head coach, and kind of just a brand new start of sorts for Transylvania. And I think the Heartland was a stronger league this year. Mount St. Joseph, Hanover, Anderson, Franklin provided, I think they were all a step above what they were in previous years. And Transylvania definitely was less of a good team than they have been in previous years, which was almost guaranteed to happen, losing that kind of talent. But they, over the course of the year, I think they got better, and they came away winning that conference like they have for many years running now.
Yeah, no, I thought it was impressive. I mean, I think it's 7 straight HCAC tournament titles now for that program. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us, just any team that loses that amount of senior and graduate student talent off a roster like they did last year, it's going to be really, really hard to then, come back and playing in a little bit of a stronger league. Again, Berea was added to the league this year and added just one more kind of quality team there. And yeah, credit to them for finding a way. I mean, they took some losses early on, but seemed to get better and progress, and they're peaking at the right time. So it's been an interesting storyline for sure this season.
In the landmark, Scranton just absolutely dominated Catholic today. Maybe a little bit angry from losing their undefeated season quite recently. But they took care of business, won the landmark, and they will be a top 4 protected seed, which we are pretty sure means that they won't face a top 8 team until the Elite 8 at the earliest, and they won't face a top 4 team until the Final 4 at the earliest. They were impressive today.
Yeah, they certainly were. And I think, I mean, that's the biggest takeaway, right? I mean, I think it was 47-17 at the half. This was a Catholic team that beat Elizabethtown at Elizabethtown in the semifinal round. Scranton is going to be a very, very difficult team to beat in the tournament, just based on the experience they have, the chemistry they have, and obviously, they're playing really, really good, smart basketball at this point in the year, just doing a lot of things right, and that's going to go a long way. I mean, as we saw today, I don't know if you could have put together a better performance in what was a top 15 matchup, if we're looking at it from a top 25 perspective. So, a lot of credit to Scranton for today's performance.
UMass Dartmouth in the Little East. They stumbled within the last 2 weeks against Keene State, but they took care of business in the Little East Conference tournament. Southern Maine has been playing really good basketball recently. They beat Rhode Island College in an upset in the semis, and I think Southern Maine had some other kind of upset wins at the end of the regular season, but Mass Dartmouth got it done today. They would have been safe from – they would have been in with a Pool C anyway, but they just went ahead and took the Pool A.
Right, and I would just note that, it was a big deal for Mass Dartmouth to get this win today because, you consider the fact that, Southern Maine was the team that before that Keene State loss you mentioned, which again, they played Keene State. It's kind of funny the way this played out. They played Keene State in that first Little East Conference tournament game back on Thursday, but before that Keene State loss at the end of the regular season, they lost to Southern Maine as well. And so for them to come back and beat a team that had already beaten them just a couple of weeks ago, just a big testament to Mass Dartmouth bouncing back. They're one of, if not the most experienced teams in the country this year. And so I think, that's certainly played into it for them, just that poise from that group, but kind of cool for them to beat the two teams that beat them at the regular season now here in postseason play.
One of my earliest Division III basketball experiences was following Hope women's basketball in the Final Four in Massachusetts, where they won the national title over Southern Virginia, I think, back in 2006.
Yep. Yeah. Southern Maine, certainly a program that has had its history of success for sure. It looks like they're getting back to that point.
Liberty League plays tomorrow, Ithaca and Vassar. This is a one-bid league. Ithaca has really been taking care of business recently, but Vassar with a strong win on the 28th, which would be yesterday, over Skidmore. Should be a good final tomorrow. Messiah looks like they are taking care. They are up 33 points in the fourth quarter. They have allowed only 28 points to Widner, right? Not Widener.
I believe so. Yeah, that might be I'm not the best for the pronunciation 101 question.
Actually, now I think it's Widener because
I think it might be Widener. Yeah.
All right. So that one is going on, but looks like it will go to Messiah, which will prevent a bid thief in the MAC Commonwealth. In the MAC Freedom, Stevens took down DeSales today. DeSales really needs to have a defensive slugfest to give themselves the best chance, and Stevens just was able to score today, and DeSales was not able to overcome it. So Stevens takes the MAC Freedom Pool A bid out of the 3 seed spot. Good for them. In the MASCAC, Bridgewater State, the 1 seed, did make it all the way through to take that conference's Pool A. I don't have a ton to say on that one. I think that game was pretty close this morning, but Bridgewater State got it done.
Yep. Yeah, kind of as expected the way that league played out. Bridgewater State was a team that made some headlines early on with a couple of wins they had in non-conference play. And then, I think they'll be an interesting team to watch in the tournament. They have some talent, a couple upperclassmen that can really make some plays. So it'll be interesting to see where they end up. Obviously, a lot of options for them bracketing-wise in that northeastern part of the country.
Yeah, let's take a quick look at Bridgewater State. So Bridgewater can get a lot of places. These are not the only possible teams they could play, as they might be busting to a host that has a different set of teams that can bust there from a different direction. But Bridgewater's about a 10, so they might be facing off against a 7. Western New England, Mass Dartmouth would be right in that range, but also it would not be a poor seeding at all to have Catholic Messiah or E-Town or Cortland or Amherst all face off against Bridgewater in the first round. And then that's kind of the 2-3 range. So wouldn't be surprised to see Bridgewater at Gettysburg or Smith.
Yeah, a lot of options there with where they can bust to. So we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, fun team to watch, and we'll see if they can kind of keep this momentum rolling.
In the MIAA, this final is going on right now. Trine was down 14. They are down 11 right now, with 6 minutes to go in the third quarter as Calvin leads them 42-31. That would be a bid thief if Calvin were able to get this one done, as Calvin knocked off Hope yesterday, breaking their 20-game losing streak against Hope and sending Hope home for the year.
Yep.
And Calvin they won't be able to send Trine home for the year, as Trine will be in the tournament regardless, but Calvin trying to punch their own ticket.
Yeah, Calvin playing really good basketball right now. That's certainly one to keep an eye on. I know I have it going on right here behind me. And keep up with the live stats here. I think it's going to be a good finish, but it's going to take a run from Trine at some point here if Trine's going to claim that MIAA title.
In the Minnesota Intercollegiate, Gustavus Adolphus in a good one against Bethel. Gustavus was up big early. Bethel kind of tightened it up down the stretch, and Gustavus was able to hold them off in the last couple minutes. It's not going to be quite enough for Gustavus to get a top 4 seed, but I believe they are going to be just fine for a top 8 seed, which is pretty sweet for them, because that limits who they can actually. I can't. It does limit who they can play against.
Yeah, it's a big deal to get that top 8. I know, as you've talked about and tweeted about as well. Getting that top 8, it's a big thing, in terms of just the way that this new bracket is going to be set up, or this bracket under, the MPI system. And I think a lot of implications there and the difference between 8 and 9 as well, right? Because like you want to be in that spot where you're not going to have to face one of those other top 8 until, you reach, I guess it would be the sectional round in that second weekend. So I think Gustavus has really put together a nice resume this year. I know I've been up and down on them as far as my top 25 ballot goes, but they showed up today against Bethel and looked really solid. Again, credit to Bethel for making a comeback there, but Gustavus is a solid program. They have a lot of momentum kind of at this point in the year. And again, another very experienced team at this point that's been in a lot of these types of situations.
Ripon led the whole way, I think, against Grinnell in the Midwest, winning the Pool A out there. I believe they were the 1 seed.
Yep.
In a 1-bid league. In the North Atlantic Conference, SUNY Cobleskill beat Maine Maritime to punch their ticket. Maine Maritime was the 1 seed. Actually, it was divisions, so they were both the 1 seeds. And I don't know who would have been the true 1 seed if there were not divisions in that conference. But Cobleskill has had a really nice year, and they get to continue in the NCAA tournament.
Yep. And I think it'll be interesting too. That was another tight game. 55-53 was the final there.
In the NACC, Wisconsin Lutheran, the 2 seed, beat St. Norbert, the 1 seed, and will represent the NACC in the NCAAs. That was a very close game throughout.
Yeah, it certainly was. And I think, again, a lot of these tight games, a lot of these 1-bid leagues really had 2 legitimate contenders. And it was fun to see some of those play out. Again, a lot on the line in a 1-bid league.
In the NCAC, we had a bid thief here when Wittenberg beat Ohio Wesleyan in the semifinals. And then in the finals, DePauw beat Wittenberg in a really low-scoring game, 46-44. So DePauw gets into the NCAA tournament. Close for Wittenberg. Wittenberg will not be getting a Pool C, but Ohio Wesleyan is also in from this conference, so they are going to be a 2-bid league. In the NESCAC, Bowdoin is just penciled in as the current projected or simulated Pool A, but Colby with a huge win over Trinity, decisive win, and Colby will be up against Bowdoin in the conference finals with a chance to make the NESCAC a 6-bid league.
Crazy crazy. And I mean, that's, it speaks to the depth of the NESCAC certainly this year. It's been really interesting to see the way that MPI has kind of valued and graded some of these NESCAC schedules. Because I think, we talked about it after they moved away from the old system. We were interested to see without these regionally ranked opponents factoring in so heavily, how do these NESCAC teams kind of stack up within MPI? And it's turned out they stack up very, very well. Because there's a legitimate chance that if Colby can pull off the upset tomorrow over Bowdoin, there's going to be 6 NESCAC teams playing the NCAA tournament. Out of a league that's I think just always been good, but it feels like the depth this year, and especially with the way MPI values their schedules, it's been really impressive to see.
I'm sure we're going to do an off-season show breaking down NPI and looking at stuff like, does the NESCAC have some unfair advantage under NPI, or like how can a league get 6 teams in? Are they all really deserving?
Yeah.
And we'll break down all those sorts of things. Moving on to the new MAC. That conference championship game is tomorrow. Smith will face off against 6 seed MIT. Smith is in the NCAA tournament regardless, but MIT will need to win that game to get themselves in.
Yep. Yeah. Potential bid thief there. Smith obviously trying to wrap it up. The NUMEC had a lot of upsets in the quarterfinal round, which, resulted in a lot of high seeds getting through. And, it'll be interesting to see the way the MIT matches up against Smith tomorrow. But a couple of conference finals tomorrow that people will probably want to circle their calendars to be tuning into.
In the end, Jack, Montclair State got back on TCNJ after losing to TCNJ in their last matchup to lose the number 1 seed in the NJAC tournament. But Montclair State won today in a close game, and they will get the Pool A from the NJAC. In the Northwest Conference, that final is going to be later tonight. Number 1 seed Whitman, number 2 seed George Fox. Whitman is in the tournament regardless, but George Fox needs to win to get a Pool A and get into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and George Fox has played Whitman, pretty tight both times in the regular season. So that's going to be an interesting one for sure out there on the West Coast. Might be worth staying up late for, I think, 9 p.m. Eastern tip-off in that one. But, yeah, certainly a cool Northwest Conference final there between Whitman and George Fox.
And George Fox had a less stressful semifinal compared to Whitman.
Right.
Maybe they're more rested, but at the end of the day, you've got 18 to 20-year-olds with their season on the line. So I'm not sure a little bit of less stress in a semi is really going to affect their energy level today. In the OAC, Baldwin-Wallace, kind of close games throughout the whole tournament. Every single game from all the teams. But Baldwin-Wallace got it done today, 64-60 over Ohio Northern, preventing a bid thief in the OAC. And Baldwin-Wallace, I think, has cemented their spot as a top 4 overall seed and a team that a quadrant will be built around.
Yeah, they've just kept winning. I mean, that's the one thing, right? 11 single-digit wins this season. I know it's certainly been somewhat of a cause for concern at points. They've had a lot of games that have been decided by 1 and 2 possessions, but they found ways to win all of them. And so I think that's a testament to their program, and it'll be the reward for getting it done against Ohio Northern today. You get that top 4 seed. I think Baldwin-Wallace right now, 25-game win streak, one of the longest in the country behind NYU. So Baldwin-Wallace with a lot of momentum heading into the tournament, just keep stacking wins.
In the ODAC, Washington Lee is currently at the half versus Randolph-Macon, leading them 33-28. That is a close one right now, and it should be a close one right up until the end. Looks like they've got the live stats switched. So I think Macon is up 33 to 28 because Catherine Kagi is Macon. So I believe Macon is up 33 to 28 at the half. And if Macon wins this, they have an outside shot at being a top 8 seed. With Oshkosh losing today, I think it is now Gettysburg's spot in the top 8 to lose. Gettysburg will have to beat Johns Hopkins tomorrow. But if Gettysburg loses and if Randolph-Macon wins this game, I think Randolph-Macon will be a top 8 seed. And both of these teams are in the NCAA tournament regardless. No bid thief out of the ODAC. This game is just for pride and for seeding. Pride, seeding, hosting, a lot of things going on.
Exactly.
In the President's Athletic Conference, Washington and Jefferson beat Chatham. I don't remember how their games have gone throughout this year, but Washington and Jefferson won today in the one that mattered most, is that is a one bid league. They won 59-50.
Yeah, I think W&J, another really solid year. I mean, and big point on their resume, right? They were the only team to beat Baldwin Wallace this year. They beat them in the season opener. So solid year again for W&J. Probably one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent teams out of the President's Athletic Conference. So good to see them get the job done.
In the SAA, we already talked about Center upset Millsaps. That was a really cool end of the game there. So Center will represent the SAA. In the SCAC, we have had quite a few upsets, as Texas Lutheran over Colorado College was an upset, and Trinity Texas over McMurray was also an upset. And so tomorrow, Trinity Texas will play Texas Lutheran. And Trinity would be a bid thief if they were to win. I believe Texas Lutheran is in regardless. But the scenarios are kind of breaking for maximum Texas teams in the tournament this year.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, the SCAC has a chance of getting 4 teams in. I'd have to go back and check. I don't know if that's ever happened. I wouldn't think so, just off the top of my head. It's really been, I mean, a big year for them. Obviously, McMurray moves over from the ASC, the American Southwest Conference, to the SCAC this year. They're going to be one of those teams, as you can see there on the graphic, that'll pick up an at-large bid. And then, we'll see what Texas Lutheran and Trinity do tomorrow. I mean, Trinity's been a team this year. It's felt like they've been very, very close in a lot of losses, notably to Illinois Wesleyan and Hardin-Simmons. Very capable of pulling off a win tomorrow. So we'll have to see how that all plays out in Dallas.
In the SCIAC, Southern California Intercollegiate, Whittier and Cal Lutheran face off tonight. Are they underway? 8 p.m. I don't have live stats for them.
Let's take a look here.
Whittier, it says 8 p.m., but I'm not seeing live stats, so I am not sure. I would imagine that this game is underway.
Yeah, I have the live stats here. Has Cal Lu up 35-26 at the half.
35-26. So I must be on the wrong team's live stats somehow. But that's going on tonight. That will be a one bid league. So both of those teams are playing to get into the NCAA tournament. In the Skyline, Mount St. Mary beat one-loss Merchant Marine in the third overtime game between these two teams this year, which is wild. But Mount St. Mary got it done, and they will represent the they will represent the Skyline as their conference tournament champion, but Merchant Marine will also represent the Skyline as an at-large bid team.
Yeah, and that's another thing to look at. Like, when was the last time the Skyline got 2 teams in? Both Mount St. Mary and Merchant Marine have been really good this year, as you talked about. Like, 3 overtime games between the two this year. Not much separates those two. Good to see Mount St. Mary kind of finally get one of those to go their way. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, both those teams now in the NCAA tournament.
So in the SLIAC, is it Principia or Principia?
I feel like it's Principia, but I don't know. I've been known to mispronounce some names.
No, I think it is. I think Principia does ring a bell. That was a major upset over Webster.
Huge.
The 4 seed, and they won right at the end on a couple plays. Really cool to see. Really unfortunate for Webster, as this is a one bid league, but a really cool ending, and it shows what's possible in a conference tournament.
Yep, exactly. No, that's why we love conference tournaments, right? It's for moments like that. It's for the upsets. Certainly something to, for Principia, just a big moment in their program's history that they'll certainly remember for a long time.
In the SUNYAC, Cortland with a convincing win over SUNY New Paltz. Cortland's season will march on. I believe they would have gotten a Pool C even if they had lost that game, but they definitely did not lose it. In the UAA, no conference tournament, so NYU has been penciled in as their automatic qualifier for a couple weeks now. So that's the UAA. And then in the United East, Gallaudet, the 3 seed, upset St. Mary's 71-70. Was that a buzzer beater?
Yeah, it was a buzzer beater kind of right at the end. I think D3 Hoops reposted the clip on Twitter. Great moment for Gallaudet to win it there right at the end.
In the UMAC, in a fairly recently finishing game, Wisconsin Superior, they were the 1 seed, but that game was close throughout. But they pulled away from Northwestern 53-47, and they will represent the UMAC in the NCAAs. In the USA South, Southern Virginia, with a good win over Brevard as they keep it rolling. And they will be in the NCAA tournament. That is a 1-bid league. And Southern Virginia, are they on some kind of a win streak at the moment?
Yeah, they're on a pretty big win streak right now. I believe it's well over 20. Yeah, it's 24 right now. They're 26-2 overall.
So they have not lost since November 19th of last year. And then in the WIAC, I heard people pronounce it the WIAC today, and I very much prefer WIAC, whether or not it's the most common pronunciation. But Wisconsin Whitewater upset Wisconsin Oshkosh. And so we actually have a question, which is, will Whitewater jump Bethel for hosting in the first weekend? And the answer to that is yes. So if we're looking at the top 16 here, we go down and Whitewater is about 12. So they're going to be about the overall 12th seed. Bethel is the overall 22nd seed. So I would expect Whitewater to be hosting an opening weekend pod. Just being in the top 16 seeds does not guarantee that you will be hosting an opening weekend pod. There's lots of requirements like submitting all your paperwork to host and meeting the requirements that the NCAA has put forth. But then also geography is in play. But Whitewater is much better geographically situated than Bethel and Stout. I think the committee will definitely find a way for Gustavus and Oshkosh to host. They're a little bit more remote geographically than Whitewater, but should be able to have those 2 schools host in addition to Whitewater, who's actually pretty close to Illinois. So I expect Whitewater to be hosting the opening round. Whitewater is because of where they're located, is sometimes pawn indicates that they're just being used, but they're kind of a wild card in that they can get to a place like Baldwin-Wallace. And so if the seeding works out, they are one of the few teams, maybe the only team from the WIAC that can go east. And with Hope unlikely to be in the tournament, there's just fewer spots to go east from Wisconsin, but they should be hosting. So I think that is the current picture. What did I have next on my list here? The current Pool C landscape. So let's go look at the Pool C picture. It actually got really simple. So we have 21 teams here because there's going to be 21 Pool C bids. There are 21 teams here, and the vast majority of them are almost certain to be in Pool C. I would say 18 are locks, and Stevens Point is as good of a lock as anything.
Pretty close, yeah.
Now, La Crosse and Mary Hardin Baylor, La Crosse and especially Mary Hardin Baylor are on very shaky ground, as 1 more bid thief probably pushes Mary Hardin Baylor out, and 2 bid thieves would push both Mary Hardin Baylor and La Crosse out. But in my simulations, I am not seeing any other teams with at-large chances. So earlier today, there was Ohio Northern and Emory and Hope and maybe even Rhode Island College with some amount of percentage between 0 and 8. And those have all gone away. And so at this point, the only thing that's going to change the Pool C picture is bid thieves.
Right.
There's not any amount of secondary or tertiary results that can change NPI enough for a different team, say, to get above Mary Hardin Baylor. Hope is close. Illinois Wesleyan winning tonight against Carroll will help Hope because Hope played Illinois Wesleyan, but as Hope lost, it's only going to change it by a pretty small amount. And it looks like that amount is not enough to potentially get Hope above Mary Hardin Baylor. But the Pool C picture has gotten very simple. I think it's just you look at these 21 teams and you start marching up the list for every additional bid thief that we have from here on out.
Right. Yeah. It's and this has been a major focus point. Really, that last group of 3 or 4 trying to figure out kind of, how many bid thieves we're going to end up getting, and then, which teams are going to be able to sustain those and which teams are going to get bounced out, have their bubbles burst as a result. Mary Hardin Baylor, really interesting situation, loses in the semifinals last night. It looked like they were done. Now today, later today, with a few different results that happened across the country, now they find themselves right back in it. And then, I'm sure everyone there is very intently watching this Calvin Trine game as Calvin's up 9 with 5:57 to go. Mary Hardin Baylor cannot sustain a Calvin win at this point. So I think it's going to be interesting to see the way that plays out. Really, the same goes for lacrosse, right? Like, we still have a lot of games tomorrow that have a chance at being bid thieves. Even later tonight, George Fox Whitman is a possibility. Carroll Illinois Wesleyan is, still a lot of time left in that one. So it'll be interesting. Lacrosse and Mary Hardin Baylor are both probably intently watching these games tonight and certainly tomorrow if they have the chance to head into tomorrow with an opportunity, still sitting on the, kind of bubble in at this point.
Yep. And so we can also update the bid thief picture. So there were 8 possible bid thieves, but we have just had a couple games go final. And so the ASC and the MAC Commonwealth can no longer be bid thieves. And so there are 6 possible teams left that if you are Mary Hardin Baylor and you are lacrosse, you are sweating out these 6 games. Foremost among them is Calvin Trine right now, down to 7 with still 5 minutes to go in that game.
Right.
But Trinity is a strong team with a 1/3-ish chance to beat Texas Lutheran. Looks like Carroll, last time I checked, was in the rearview mirror. They're down 13. Second half has just begun, so that game is far from over. And then good one tonight with George Fox. I think it's helpful to show that after results yesterday, at a point yesterday, Mary Hardin Baylor's this percentage was 0.
Right.
And you might say, like, oh, was that inaccurate? And it shows how there's a difference between a simulation and a projection. Right. So the simulation was just saying at that point, with the results that we knew, in 1,000 simulations, there was no scenario that Mary Hardin Baylor made the NCAA tournament. It didn't mean that a scenario didn't exist in which Mary Hardin Baylor made the tournament. If I ran 10,000 simulations, maybe we see like, oh, it was 0.9% or 1 point, something small that didn't actually show up in 1,000 simulations. But a simulation is just repeating something with some variation a bunch of times and then looking at the results. We can always have a series of low probability events all happen. And so it was a low probability event that WashU was going to lose today, and Emory was going to lose today, and McMurray was going to lose today. And there was probably a handful of other ones. I'm trying to think of who might have affected Hope and Ohio Northern. But it actually was more Mary Hardin Baylor through secondary results going up about 0.18 in NPI than Ohio Northern or Hope decreasing necessarily. And so that's why I really try to call these simulations. I don't like calling them predictions or projections because they're not. Like, yeah, if I was able to go to the casino and say we get to play, what's a game going, Calvin and Trine women 1,000 times, like I'm going to bet on Trine, but like we get one game, and that's kind of the beauty of sports, where in one game, a 5% probable outcome happens, you know,
Right.
a percentage of the time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You never know.
Yeah, so it's definitely made me think about how can I better represent those scenarios? Like, should I just be running more simulations to show that Mary Hardmailer wasn't really down to 0 and they just went up from 0 based off of results that happened? They went up from 0.9%, because of results that happened. But yeah, it's an interesting data information problem. So, Sunday's games. Really, Sunday's games is just look at this, right?
Yep.
We've got
Yep.
the NUMAC. If you're on the bubble, you want Smith to win. We've got the NESCAC. You want Bowdoin to beat Colby. This game's tonight. The SCAC is tomorrow, right?
SCAC is tomorrow. Yep.
So NUMAC, NESCAC, SCAC. The Centennial does not have a bid thief opportunity with Gettysburg and Johns Hopkins, so that will not affect the Pool C picture. And the Liberty League, Ithaca and Vassar, also, they are a one-bid league, will not affect the Pool C picture. Obviously, affects the NCAA tournament picture at large. But, yeah, viewing interests and rooting interests tomorrow will be pretty simple.
Yep. Yeah. Just look at that list right there, and you'll figure out who you need to be rooting for if you're in a position where your chances are slim, or you're kind of sitting on the bubble still, which isn't very many teams. But even for seeding purposes, there's some there will be some effects based on if a couple of these results happen. But yeah, it'll be interesting to watch the way that these games still play out here, because still a lot of really good ones left. And by this point tomorrow, we'll know the entire tournament field. So yeah, less than 24 hours until that point.
Looks like we don't have any other questions at the moment, so let's just look through where I've got the top 4, 8, and 16 seeds at the moment. So the top 4 really looks like it'll be Bowdoin, and I mean Bowdoin needs to win tomorrow to stay 1. Right. I don't know where they would drop to if they lose. I don't think it would be outside the top 4, but I don't know that for sure. But Bowdoin, NYU, Scranton, and Baldwin-Wallace. So our expectation is that they would all be 1s and 1 seeds in different quadrants, and that Bowdoin and Baldwin-Wallace would be on one side of the bracket, lining them up to meet in the Final Four, and NYU and Scranton would be on the other side of the bracket, lining up to meet in the Final Four if those teams get that far. I am not sure in what scenario Whitman moves into the top. We can play this out. So let's see here. Whitman, to get into the top 4, obviously would have to win if they get in 1.1% of the time. They definitely need East Texas Baptist to win, which they have already done. And they probably need Cal Lutheran to win. And then for Baldwin-Wallace, is there a way that Baldwin-Wallace can go down? They probably need Trine to lose.
Yeah, which 6-point game right now. Calvin's up, 2:10 left.
So, I mean, that could be a wild scenario if Trine loses, ETBU wins, which they already have. And I already forget my other ones and Whitman themselves win, and Cal Lutheran wins. And they were up. So I don't know if those 4 results are enough to get Whitman into the 4th spot, but there is definitely a percentage of the time that that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that's Yeah, I mean, and Kowloon right now is up 41-29 midway through the third. So, yeah, certainly, I mean, there's a chance right there for them to make that jump in the top four, which again would be big for Whitman. It would be very interesting. I should just note, I think we've talked about this plenty, but Whitman being a very island team out there in Washington, it's going to be interesting. They get a top four. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're hosting sectionals. I think as much as we would probably like that to be the case, it would require 3 flights to get there for a sectionals with Whitman hosting. So for anyone watching that sees that, maybe thinks if Whitman gets in the top 4, they're hosting sectionals. Not necessarily the case based on just some of the constraints placed on the committee. So we'll have to see how that plays out as well.
For the top 8. Looks like we are, again, that situation I presented earlier. Gettysburg is in that 8th spot at the moment, but they do need to win tomorrow. And they would fall out if they don't. And it looks like Macon, actually, like if Gettysburg loses and Macon loses, maybe Oshkosh is back in that 8th spot, I think. So there are 10 teams there for 8 spots, 2 of which are still alive and need to, well, Illinois Wesleyan is still alive as well, but they are up 10. So it's tightened up just a little bit. So I don't know if Illinois Wesleyan can fall out of the top 8 by losing today. And then looking at the top 16, let's go back to the top 8. The extra perk of being a top 8 is you are guaranteed to not face another team in the top 8 until the Elite 8.
Right.
Like it cannot happen. Whereas if you're in the top 16, theoretically, you could face another team in the top 16 in the first round. Like there's nothing preventing it. The committee obviously is going to work their hardest to not have something like that happen, or even face 2 top 16 teams in the second round, but it's not disallowed.
Right.
So 16 right now goes through Ohio Wesleyan. They cannot lose again. Trine might fall out. I don't know if Trine would go below Catholic, because Catholic and Christopher Newport are done. That might be the scenario that Washington Lee gets up into the top 16 if they can beat Randolph-Macon and if Trine does lose, because these 13 are locked in. So I don't think Hopkins, even if Hopkins loses, they're not going to fall out of the top 16. Same with Smith. So that's kind of a look at those seeds. We had a question: will a Calvin win over Trine boost Stout's NPI enough to go up a couple of spots? So let's look at it. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but basically, if Calvin wins this game, it would be worth 75.16 in NPI, which is a whole lot. They would go up about 0.75. So we take 0.75 and divide it by the number of Stout's games, which is not Stout. I believe it would be by their 15 wins, and I don't have their losses here. It's over here. They're 15-7, so 22. So 0.75 divided by 22, 0.034 is what Stout stands to potentially gain. So then Stout here is at 60.7, so they would go up to what? 0.742, which would move them up 1 spot over Elizabethtown. I don't think that would be a significant change to seeding and would not get Stout into hosting territory. Calvin, now, because Calvin's NPI is at 54 and it would rise higher above 54, Stout will get some additional quality win bonus from Calvin's increase. So maybe another couple thousandths probably of quality win bonus. It would be more than thousandths of the quality win bonus, but when spread out among Stout's 22 counting games, it would be thousandths to their NPI, I believe. Anything else you think is good for us to cover tonight, Riley?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, this probably covers a lot of it in terms of what people are kind of looking at and thinking. Still some results that are going to affect things. Calvin just won 70-57. That result is final, so that's gonna change things just a little bit. Calvin gets the AQ there. Honestly, I would just note too with that matchup in particular, it's really interesting. The way some of these conference tournaments play out and the matchups we get. The seeding is a factor, but I almost wonder, like, again, Hope is a very talented team, without a doubt. I think they would have had a chance against Trine for sure. But the way that Trine matched up against Calvin this year, and for whatever the reason, I would have to go back and watch the games to have a better idea, but it felt like Calvin just had some kind of a different and maybe better, more favorable matchup against Trine than maybe Hope did. And again, some of it's just the way the games played out, but Calvin was the one that really pushed Trine not too long ago. So interesting the way that played out, and for Calvin to win by 13 on Trine's home floor, big win for them as that one goes final. But no, I think we covered a lot of good stuff here. I'm certainly interested to see the way that tomorrow plays out as we wrap up conference tournaments.
I don't want to put too much on tape about my thoughts on Calvin's deficiencies. But they're a very long and athletic team that has been elite when it comes to rebounding and blocking shots. And so they're often hard to score against, but they haven't been as proficient on the offensive end. I wouldn't be surprised if their shooting percentages are, I don't know where they would stand relative to average, but probably lower than Hope and Trine, and probably more turnover prone. But Trine is a really solid rebounding team as well. And I don't know if Calvin is just able to match up better in that department. I could be proved incredibly wrong going back to look at the box scores and see the rebounding disparity or shots taken disparity. But for the first half of the game last night, I mean, Hope was not rebounding a single thing.
Right.
They were never in position for a rebound and were just taking a lot fewer shots than Calvin was taking. But yeah, like, conference tournaments are fascinating in that you often get the best teams at the end who are playing for the third time.
Right.
And it's just kind of, like Millsaps is a good example. That was Center and Millsaps, right? I think Millsaps had beaten them twice, and now they just lose once and don't get to go to the NCAA tournament. And it's just, you hear announcers comment that it's hard to beat a team 3 times, and it's true. But you got to do it if you want to punch your spot.
Right. Yeah, it's part of it. It's a tough part of it for sure, and I get it. It's a hard deal. I know some people look at that NYU AQ, the UAA not having a conference tournament, and think, man, that would be nice. But at the same time, too, I think there's certainly pros and cons with both systems. Having a conference tournament and not having one. But yeah, interesting stuff. So one bit thief already tonight. We'll see how the rest of it plays out.
And it's going to make me want to tweak my simulations, because I was seeing a median number of bit thieves as 2 with a maximum of 6. Yeah. And we were at 5 already. And having 5 does not mean that I had poor variability logic in my simulations. This could just be one of those close to the outlier scenarios. But it's still something that I want to revisit. And with any simulation, like, your assumptions and the logic that you put into it drive everything. Yep. And so, like, I can increase the variability and you're going to see a wider variance in types of outcomes, and I can decrease the variability and you're going to see favorites win a lot more of the time. But yeah. All right. So we covered all of the AQs that have been given out. We covered the bid thieves, the current Pool C picture, which has changed already, and then prepared everyone for tomorrow. So tomorrow we will be doing another live stream, probably around 2 p.m. Eastern. That will probably be during some of the remaining conference tournament games, but we will give you a more complete picture of Pool C then. And we're going to have on some guests. We've got a former head coach and we've got a former women's basketball committee member, and we will talk to them about their experiences around the NCAA tournament and this time of the year.
Yep, it should be a lot of fun. I know I'll be at the SCAC championship game, so I'll be joining y'all live from there. But it should be a great show. Excited for that. Excited to kind of break down what by that point we'll have the tournament field most likely. Maybe missing only one or two AQs by that point, but hopefully everyone should be in. So yeah, it'll be a cool show. Certainly make sure to tune in for that one as we continue to kind of break down this big weekend in Division III women's basketball.
Yep. So we'll probably be more talking about the potentials of the bracket, geography things that are forcing the committee's hands while bracketing, or things that give them flexibility. And then on Monday, the 3rd, after the women's selection show, we will also be having a show to break down the bracket and talk about where the difficult pods, quadrants and sides of the bracket are, where the slightly easier ones are. And that's because there are many different ways to quantify a team, not just by their NPI. And so there's no guarantee, even in an NPI world, that every single pod or quadrant would be exactly equal. There will still be some deviation. There might be less than there has been in the past, maybe. But we will cover that and then look at potential sectional hosts. There are definitely things that you can see in the geography. Yeah, I think that's it. So tomorrow, Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern, right around there. And then on Monday the 3rd, around 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And both of those are subject to change as we are figuring out our own schedules, but should be around then. But thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Absolutely. Appreciate everyone tuning in. Appreciate the support. Yeah. Follow us on X/Twitter. We'll be posting updates on exact timing there and the links to these shows, but keep following us there as the rest of this all plays out.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.